Dinner. Tomorrow night. 7 o'clock. Or something nice. I have business. Cancel it. The line went dead. Jinwoo stared at his phone, jaw clenched. His mother was the only person in Seoul who could give him orders. Even the most feared Mafia boss in the city bent to his mother's will. But first, there was today. And today, Jinwoo Park needed coffee. Jinwoo ordered, paid without looking at the cashier, and stepped aside to wait. He was checking his phone, reviewing reports from his clubs, when he felt the impact. Hot. Vet. Searing pain across his chest and stomach. Coffee. Everywhere. Oh my God. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Jinwoo looked up slowly, deliberately, his expression glacial. The woman before him was frantically trying to wipe the coffee from his suit with napkins, making it worse with every swipe. American accent. Brown skin. Exhausted eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Black. Of course. Stop, he said, his voice cutting through her panicked apologies like a blade. She froze, finally looking up at him. Her eyes widened, taking in his expression, the ruined suit, the way everyone in the cafe had gone completely silent. I'm so sorry, she said again, quieter now. Please, let me pay for the dry cleaning, or you just made the worst mistake of your day. Jinwoo's voice was cold enough to frost the windows. He plucked at the soaked fabric clinging to his skin, ruined beyond repair. 5 million won, destroyed by carelessness. It was an accident, the woman said, and he heard steel beneath her apology now. Good. Let her feel some of what he felt. I'm a doctor. I just finished a 16-hour shift at a free clinic, and I'm exhausted, and I didn't see you. A doctor. Jinwoo's lip curled. Fascinating. Does your medical training not include basic spatial awareness? Her cheeks flushed. Look, I said I was sorry. I meant it. But you're being incredibly rude. The cafe held its collective breath. No one spoke to Jinwoo Park this way. His bodyguard appeared at his elbows. They'd been waiting outside, but someone must have signaled them. The woman's eyes went wide as she took in the two massive men flanking him. Who are you? She whispered. Jinwoo leaned in close enough that only she could hear his next words. Someone you should have been more careful around, Dr. Davis. Rosie Davis. Dr. Davis. He straightened, face impassive. Stay out of my way. If you want to see how a woman he hated became the only one who could save him, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like if you're ready for a story about second chances, and comment below. Team Jinwoo or Team Rosie? Now let's continue. He turned and walked out, leaving her standing there in a puddle of spilled coffee, confusion and hurt written across her face. In his rearview mirror, as his car pulled away, Jinwoo saw her slump against the counter, head in her hands. He felt nothing. Nothing at all. That was what he told himself, anyway. He couldn't shake the image of her face, the genuine remorse, the flash of defiance, the exhaustion that spoke of someone who gave more than they had to give. 16-hour shift at a free clinic. He crushed that thought before it could take root. She was nothing. No one. A clumsy American who'd be gone from Seoul soon enough, back to whatever comfortable life she'd left behind. He didn't know that in 2 weeks, his mother would trap them both in a game neither wanted to play. He didn't know that the woman who'd spilled coffee on him would become the woman who'd save his life. All Jinwoo knew, standing in that shower, was that he hated the way her apology had sounded genuine. He hated that some small, buried part of him had wanted to accept it. He hated that for just a moment, looking into her exhausted eyes, he'd forgotten to hate it all. The water ran cold. Jinwoo turned it off and stepped out, wrapping himself in a towel. Tomorrow, his mother's dinner. Some society woman she'd chosen, no doubt. Someone appropriate. Someone safe. Someone who wasn't Dr. Rosie Davis. Jinwoo had built an empire on the ruins of his broken heart. He'd made himself into something harder than diamond, sharper than glass. Nothing and no one would break him again. But fate, as it turned out, had a wicked sense of humor. And his mother had a plan. The restaurant was called Moonlight Garden, perched on the top floor of one of Seoul's most exclusive hotels. Jinwoo arrived exactly on time, as he always did. Punctuality was a form of control, and control was everything. His mother hadn't arrived yet. Unusual. Park Hyun-ju was never late. Jinwoo settled into the private dining room, surrounded by silk screens and delicate orchids. The waitstaff moved like ghosts, pouring water, adjusting silverware, their eyes never quite meeting his. He'd been coming to this restaurant for years, and they all knew who he was. The door opened. Jinwoo looked up, preparing his polite greeting for whatever socialite his mother had selected. The words died in his throat. Dr. Rosie Davis stood in the doorway, wearing a simple black dress that looked borrowed, her natural hair pulled back in an elegant twist. She was stunning in a way that had nothing to do with the dress and everything to do with the genuine warmth in her eyes. Until she saw him. Her face went through a rapid succession of emotions: confusion, recognition, horror, something that might have been anger. "No," she said softly. "No, this can't be. Sit down." Jinwoo's voice came out harsher than he intended. His mind was racing. This was his mother's doing. This was her idea of appropriate, of safe. "I'm so sorry," Rosie stammered, backing toward the door. "There's been a mistake. Your mother, she told me. She said her son needed to meet someone who cared about more than money and power, and I thought, but I didn't know it was you. I'll just go. Seat. Down." Jinwoo stood, his movements deliberate and controlled. "My mother arranged this. We will give her what she wants. 1 hour. Then we never speak of this again." Rosie hesitated, her hand on the door handle. For a moment, Jinwoo thought she might actually leave, and he was surprised by the strange disappointment that flickered through him. Then her spine straightened. "Fine. 1 hour." She crossed the room and sat down across from him, her movements stiff with barely concealed tension. The waiter appeared, began describing the evening's menu, but Jinwoo waved him away. "We'll order later." Silence descended like a suffocating blanket. Jinwoo stared at the orchid centerpiece. Rosie studied her water glass. Somewhere in the distance, soft music played, traditional Gaejim, its notes delicate and mournful. "I really am sorry," Rosie said finally. "About the coffee. I didn't realize I know it was expensive and it was 5 million won." She sucked in a breath. 5 million. That's over $3,000 for a suit? Yes. That's insane. Jinwoo's eyes snapped to hers. "Excuse me?" I said it's insane. Rosie leaned forward, and he saw fire in her eyes now. "Do you know how many children I could vaccinate for $3,000? How many elderly patients I could treat? How many meals I could provide? I'm not a charity, Dr. Davis." Clearly, she sat back, arms crossed. "Let me guess. You have a dozen more suits just like it at home." 37, actually. "Of course you do." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. While people are dying in the streets because they can't afford basic medicine, Jinwoo felt his jaw clench. "You know nothing about me. I know enough. I know you're the kind of man who makes everyone around him afraid. I saw in the coffee shop the way people looked at you, the way your bodyguards appeared like you'd summoned demons. I know you think money and power make you untouchable. They do. They make you alone." Rosie's voice softened. "I've seen men like you before, so wrapped up in their empires that they forget what it means to be human." The words hit harder than Jinwoo expected. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This was a mistake. Finally, something we agree on. But neither of them moved toward the door. They stood there, tension crackling between them like electricity before a storm. "Why did you agree to this?" Jinwoo asked, surprising himself with the question. Rosie's expression shifted, vulnerability flickering across her face before she locked it away. "Your mother came to my clinic 3 days ago. She watched me work for hours, didn't say a word. Then, when I was closing up, she approached me. She said her son was lost, and she was dying, and she needed someone to show him there was still good in the world." Jinwoo felt the floor tilt beneath him. "She said she was dying? Cancer. Stage 3. She is 6 months, maybe less." Rosie's eyes searched his face. "You didn't know?" He sat down heavily, the anger draining out of him. His mother, dying, and she'd spent her time finding him a blind date instead of telling him the truth. "I didn't know," he said quietly. Rosie sat down too, slower now. "I'm sorry. I thought. She tells me nothing if she thinks it will make me worry." Jinwoo's hands curled into fists on the table. "She is the most stubborn woman in Seoul. She loves you very much. That's why she asked me to meet you. She said you needed someone who would challenge you, not fear you." And you don't fear me? Rosie met his eyes directly. I've worked in war zones, Mr. Park. I've held dying children in my arms. I've performed surgery by candlelight when the power went out. You don't scare me. You just make me sad. Thought. The word tasted foreign. Yes, because I think somewhere under all that anger and ice, there's a person who's been hurt so badly he forgot how to heal. She paused. Your mother showed me a picture of you from 5 years ago. You were smiling. Really smiling. What happened to that man? Jean Woo's breath caught. He remembered that picture. It had been taken at his father's birthday party, before everything fell apart. Before her. Before the betrayal that had turned him into this. He died, Jean Woo said flatly. Did he? Or did you just bury him so deep you forgot he existed? The waiter appeared again, nervously clearing his throat. Jean Woo realized they'd been sitting there for 20 minutes without ordering. He gestured for menus, grateful for the interruption. They ordered in silence, Rosie choosing the least expensive items, Jean Woo noticed, while he selected dishes without looking at prices. When the waiter left, Rosie spoke again. Tell me about your mother. What was she like before she got sick? It was such a simple question, so ordinary, but Jean Woo found himself answering. Fierce. Brilliant. She built half my father's empire while raising me alone. He was always working. She taught me that strength isn't about how hard you hit, but how well you protect what matters. She sounds amazing. She is. Jean Woo's voice softened despite himself. When my father died, she kept the whole organization from falling apart. Men 3 times her age feared her. Still do. And she wants you to meet me because she thinks I've become a monster. The words came out before Jean Woo could stop them. She's not wrong. Rosie tilted her head, studying him. I don't think you're a monster. I think you're scared. I am not. Terrified. Rosie continued as if he hadn't spoken. Of being hurt again. Of trusting again. Of feeling again. So you built walls so high no one can climb them. But walls that keep pain out also keep love out. And that's the loneliest prison of all. Jean Woo stood again, but this time Rosie stood with him, blocking his path to the door. I get it, she said softly. Someone hurt you. Someone who looked like me. Maybe. Is that why you've been so hostile? Because I remind you of whoever broke your heart. His silence was answer enough. I'm not her, Rosie said firmly. I don't know who she was or what she did, but I'm not her. I'm just a doctor who came to Seoul to make a difference. Who spilled coffee on a stranger because I was exhausted from trying to save lives with resources that wouldn't fill a closet. Who agreed to this ridiculous blind date because a dying woman asked me to give her son a chance. Jean Woo looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Not through the lens of his prejudice or his pain, but at the woman standing before him. There were shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Her hands were steady, surgeon's hands, but he noticed a small scar on her left wrist. Her dress was elegant, but worn at the hem. Everything about her spoke of someone who gave more than she kept. Why Seoul? He asked, his voice quieter now. American doctors can make fortunes. Why come here to work for free? Rosie's expression flickered with something painful. Because everyone I ever loved left me. My father walked out when I was 6. My mother died when I was 15. My fiancé, she stopped, swallowed hard. My fiancé left 3 days before our wedding. Said he couldn't marry someone who cared more about strangers than building a life with him. So I came here to prove something to myself. That I could be the one who stays. That I could commit to something bigger than my own broken heart. The honesty in her words cut through Jean Woo's defenses like a scalpel. They were the same, he realized. Both running from pain. Both hiding behind their work. Both terrified of trusting again. Sit down, he said gentler this time. Please. The food will be here soon. Rosie hesitated, then nodded. They sat, and this time the silence felt different. Less hostile, more contemplative. The food arrived in waves, galbi-jjim, japchae, fresh sashimi arranged like art. Rosie's eyes widened at the spread. This is too much, she murmured. Eat. You said you worked 16 hours. When was your last meal? I had a granola bar around noon yesterday. Jean Woo felt unexpected anger flare. You worked 30 hours without eating? Mrs. Kim's grandson needed emergency treatment. Then there was a pregnant woman with complications. Then 3 cases of pneumonia in the elderly housing complex. Rosie picked up her chopsticks, her movements elegant despite her exhaustion. Tom got away from me. You'll die if you keep working like that. We all die eventually. She took a bite of the Galbi Jim and closed her eyes. Oh my God, this is incredible. Jean Wu found himself almost smiling. Almost. The chef has been here for 30 years. My mother loves his cooking. They ate in silence for a while, but it was a comfortable silence now. Jean Wu watched Rosie savor each bite. Her genuine appreciation for the food so different from the jaded palates of the society women he usually encountered. Tell me about your clinic, he said, surprising himself again. Rosie's face lit up. It's in Dongdaemun, in one of the older neighborhoods. The building is falling apart. I spend half my donations on repairs instead of medicine. But the people there, they're incredible. They look after each other. They bring me homemade food, even though they can barely feed themselves. There's this little boy, Minjun, he's 7. Leukemia. He needs treatment we can't afford, but he comes to the clinic anyway, just to draw pictures for the other patients. He says if he can't be healthy, at least he can make people smile. What does he need? The question came out before Jean Wu could think about it. Chemotherapy, medications, a bone marrow transplant eventually. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. His grandmother is trying to sell their apartment, but in that neighborhood, it won't be enough. Jean Wu pulled out his phone and made a note. Rosie frowned. What are you doing? Nothing. You put the phone away. Keep talking about your work. She did, her passion evident in every word. She told him about the elderly man who'd lived alone for 20 years, forgotten by his children, until Rosie started visiting. About the teenage mother who'd been thrown out by her family, whom Rosie had helped find housing and job training. About the community garden they'd started, growing vegetables because fresh food was too expensive for most residents. Jean Wu listened, and with each story, something inside him cracked. This was real. This mattered. While he'd been building an empire of clubs and protection money and carefully managed vice, this woman had been actually saving lives. You think I'm naive? Rosie said, reading his expression. No, I think you're remarkable. The words came out raw, honest. I think you're doing what most people only pretend to care about. I think, he stopped, shook his head. I think my mother chose well. Rosie blinked, clearly surprised. That might be the first genuine compliment you've given me. I don't give compliments. I state facts. Is that what you tell yourself? She leaned forward, elbows on the table in a way that would scandalize the society women Jean Wu knew. You hide behind facts and money and power because feelings are messy. Feelings can hurt you. Better to feel nothing than risk feeling everything. You sound like you're speaking from experience. I am. After my fiancé left, I was numb for months. Went through the motions. Smiled when appropriate. Cried when I was alone. Then one day, I delivered a baby in a refugee camp. The mother had nothing. No family, no money, no home. But when I put that baby in her arms, she looked at her child with such pure love that I remembered what it felt like to feel. Really feel. And I realized that being numb isn't protecting yourself. It's just a slower way of dying. Jean Wu set down his chopsticks carefully. 3 years ago, I was in love. Or I thought I was. Her name was Jasmine. She was beautiful, intelligent, everything I thought I wanted. I introduced her to my father, brought her into my organization. She had access to everything. My accounts, my plans, my vulnerabilities. He paused, the memory still sharp enough to draw blood. She was working with my rivals the entire time. Stole 40 million won. Stole information worth 10 times that. Nearly destroyed everything my family had built. My father confronted me the day I found out. Said I'd let emotion make me weak. That I'd betrayed generations of Park family legacy for a pretty face. Then he had a heart attack. Died right there in front of me. His last words were, "You let a woman destroy us." Rosie's hand moved across the table, covering his before he realized what she was doing. Her touch was warm, steady. That must have been unbearable. So I made a rule. No black women in my clubs, my businesses, my life. If I never let anyone like her close again, I could never be hurt like that again. But you're still hurt. Rosie's thumb brushed across his knuckles, and Jean Wu realized he hadn't pulled away. You carry the hurt every single day. That's not protection. That's just making one woman's betrayal define your entire life. Jean Wu finally pulled his hand back, but gently. She looked like you. I know. I figured that out when you looked at me in the coffee shop like I was a ghost. Rosie's eyes held his. But I'm not a ghost, Jean Wu. I'm not your ex. I'm not whatever nightmare she left you with. I'm just Rosie, and maybe that's not enough for you, and that's okay. But don't punish me for her crimes. He wanted to argue, wanted to retreat behind his walls. But sitting there with Rosie, in the soft light of the restaurant, Jean Wu felt something shift inside him. Not breaking exactly, more like thawing. My mother gave me an ultimatum, he said quietly. One date with you, or she signs everything over to my cousin. I thought she was being manipulative. Now I think she was being wise. What do you mean? She knew I needed to meet someone who wouldn't be impressed by my money, who wouldn't fear my reputation, who would see through my defenses to whatever is left underneath. Jean Wu met Rosie's eyes. Someone exactly like you. Rosie smiled, and it transformed her face. Your mother is a very smart woman. Dangerously so. They finished their meal, talking about safer things, Seoul's neighborhoods, American versus Korean medical practices, the best street food vendors. Jean Wu found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. Found himself almost laughing at one of Rosie's stories about a patient who tried to pay her in homemade kimchi. When the check came, Rosie reached for it. Jean Wu raised an eyebrow. I'm paying, she said firmly. With what? Your granola bar budget. She glared at him, but there was humor in it. Fine. But next time, we're going somewhere I can afford. Next time, Jean Wu heard himself say. Rosie's cheeks flushed. I mean, if there's a next time. Your mother asked for one date. We fulfilled that obligation. My mother asked for one date. She said nothing about what I might want. The words surprised Jean Wu as much as they seemed to surprise Rosie. 1 week. Give me 1 week to prove I'm not the monster you think I am. I never said you were a monster. You implied it heavily. Jean Wu stood, extending his hand. 1 week. I'll come to your clinic. I'll see your work. And if at the end of 7 days you still think I'm a lost cause, I'll leave you alone forever. Rosie stared at his hand for a long moment. Then she took it, her grip firm and warm. 1 week. But if you show up and disrespect my patients or treat anyone with that ice-cold attitude, I'm kicking you out. Fair enough. They walked out of the restaurant together, the Seoul night air cool against their faces. Jean Wu's car waited at the curb, sleek and black and expensive. Rosie's bus stop was 2 blocks away. Let me drive you home, Jean Wu offered. I can take the bus. Dr. Davis. Rosie. He opened the car door. You've worked 30 hours straight. Please, let me do this one thing. She hesitated, then nodded. The drive to Dongdaemun took 20 minutes, through streets that grew progressively narrower and darker. Jean Wu watched the neighborhood change through the windows, gleaming high-rises giving way to aging apartment blocks, designer boutiques replaced by small family shops. This is where you live? He asked as they pulled up to a building that looked like it might collapse in a strong wind. It's not much, but it's close to the clinic. And Mrs. Choi on the 3rd floor makes the best Pajeon in Seoul. Rosie gathered her things. Thank you for dinner. And for listening. I know tonight wasn't what either of us expected. No, Jean Wu agreed. It wasn't. She started to get out, then turned back. Jean Wu, your father was wrong. You didn't let a woman destroy your family. You love someone who didn't deserve it. That's not weakness. That's just being human. She was gone before he could respond, disappearing into the building. Jean Wu sat there for a long moment, watching the light come on in a 4th floor window. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. It's me. I need information on a boy. Name is Min Jun, age 7, leukemia patient in Dongdaemun. Find the best oncologist in Seoul. Send them to Dr. Rosie Davis's clinic tomorrow. Cost is irrelevant. And wire 5 million won to the clinic's operating account. Anonymously. He hung up and told his driver to go home. But as the car pulled away, Jean Wu looked back at that 4th floor window and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. The next morning, Jean Wu arrived at the clinic at 8 a.m. sharp, carrying 2 coffees from the place where they'd first met. It was a peace offering, though he'd never admitted out loud. The clinic was worse than he'd imagined. The building leaned slightly to the left. Paint peeled from the walls. The waiting room was packed with people sitting on mismatched chairs, some looking like they'd been there all night. The smell of disinfectant barely masked the underlying scent of mold and age. Rosie emerged from an exam room, wearing scrubs covered in cartoon characters. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she looked exhausted already. Then she saw him and stopped short. You came. I said I would. He held out the coffee. Peace offering. I checked with the barista. This one has no trajectory toward expensive suits. She laughed, actually laughed, and took the cup. Thank you. I've already seen 12 patients, and it's not even 9. Where's your staff? You're looking at it. I have a part-time nurse who comes in afternoons, and a volunteer translator for our non-Korean speakers. Everyone else is me. Jean Woo looked around at the crowded waiting room. This is impossible for one person. I make it work. She took a sip of coffee, closed her eyes in appreciation. God, I needed this. Okay, ground rules. You can observe, but you don't interfere. You don't judge my patients. You don't make anyone uncomfortable. And if I need space to work, you give it to me. Deal. Deal. The morning was a revelation. Jean Woo watched Rosie move from patient to patient with tireless compassion. She spoke basic Korean, enough to communicate, supplemented with gestures and the translation app on her phone. She treated everyone with the same care. The elderly woman with diabetes, the construction worker with a broken finger, the young mother with 3 sick children. Around noon, a small boy ran in, clutching a piece of paper. He was painfully thin, wearing clothes too big for his frame, but his smile was radiant. Dr. Rosie! Dr. Rosie! I drew you. Rosie's entire face lit up. Min-yoon, let me see. She knelt down to his level, studying the crayon, drawing seriously. Is this me? With a stethoscope. And these are the flowers I'm going to bring you when I'm better. Min-jun pointed to colorful scribbles that might have been flowers or might have been explosions. Grandma says thank you for the medicine. It makes my tummy hurt less. Jean Woo watched the interaction, something tight forming in his chest. This was the boy, the one who needed treatment they couldn't afford. Min-jun, I want you to meet someone. Rosie gestured to Jean Woo. This is Mr. Park. He's visiting the clinic today. Min-jun looked up at Jean Woo with huge eyes. Are you Dr. Rosie's boyfriend? Jean Woo nearly choked on his coffee. Rosie's cheeks went bright red. No, it's with you. He's just a friend. Oh, Grandma says Dr. Rosie needs a boyfriend because she works too much and forgets to eat. Grandma talks too much, Rosie said, but she was smiling. Now go sit with her while she waits. I'll see you both in a few minutes. Min-jun skipped away, humming to himself. Jean Woo waited until he was out of earshot. How long does he have? Rosie's smile faded. Without treatment? 6 months, maybe less. With treatment we can't afford? He could live a normal life. Childhood leukemia has an 85% survival rate now, but that requires chemotherapy, medication, monitoring. Things that cost more than his grandmother makes in 5 years. There has to be something. There isn't. I've applied for every grant, every charity program. We're on waiting lists. But waiting lists don't care that Min-jun is 7 years old and wants to grow up to be an astronaut. Jean Woo pulled out his phone, made a note. Rosie frowned. What are you doing? Nothing. Checking messages. She looked suspicious, but let it go, turning to call Min-jun's grandmother into the exam room. Jean Woo watched them go, then sent a text to his assistant. Expedite the oncologist. Today if possible, and triple the donation. The afternoon brought more patients, more stories, more glimpses into lives Jean Woo had never considered. The elderly man, named Mr. Jang, who came in for his blood pressure medication and stayed to tell rambling stories about the war. The teenage mother named Sue Jean, whose baby had a fever and who clearly hadn't slept in days. The construction worker who'd cut his hand and couldn't afford to miss work for proper treatment. Rosie treated them all with patience and kindness Jean Woo found almost painful to watch. This was what caring looked like. This was what it meant to give without expecting anything in return. Around 4 o'clock, a well-dressed man entered the clinic, looking completely out of place. He introduced himself as Dr. Kim, one of Seoul's top pediatric oncologists. I received a call about a young leukemia patient, he said. Min-yoon. Rosie's mouth fell open. Yes, but I didn't. How did you? Doktor Kim Simidet. An anonymous donor requested I evaluate him for treatment. All costs covered. Where is he? Rosie's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Jean Woo, who was suddenly very interested in his phone. Jean Woo, did you? I made some calls, he said quietly. considerate payment for the suit. That suit was $3,000. This treatment is going to cost hundreds of thousands. Then I'm overpaying. He met her eyes. Swimming. Rosie crossed the room in 3 steps and hugged him. It was completely unexpected, her arms wrapping around him tight, her face pressed against his chest. Jean Wu froze, every muscle tensing. He couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged him. Years, maybe. Slowly, awkwardly, Jean Wu's arms came up to return the embrace. Rosie was warm and solid against him, and she smelled like antiseptic and coffee and something floral he couldn't identify. His heart hammered in his chest, and for a terrifying moment, he thought he might actually feel something. "Thank you," Rosie whispered against his shirt. "You have no idea what this means." To him, to his grandmother, to me. She pulled back, wiping her eyes, laughing at herself. I'm a mess. I just thank you. Jean Wu cleared his throat, straightening his jacket to give his hands something to do. It's just money. It's never just money. Money is time. Time is life. You just gave that little boy his life back. She squeezed his hand once, then turned to find Min Jun's grandmother, her voice echoing through the clinic. Mrs. Park. Mrs. Park, I have incredible news." Jean Wu watched her go, watched the elderly woman's face crumple with joy, watched Min Jun jump up and down, even though he didn't fully understand what was happening. He watched Rosie cry and laugh and hug them both, and something inside his chest cracked wide open. This was what his money could do, not by influence or fear or loyalty, but this: hope, life, joy. His phone buzzed. His cousin. Jean Wu ignored it. Whatever power play was brewing in his organization could wait. For the first time in 3 years, something mattered more than the empire. That night, Jean Wu took Rosie to a pojangmaka, a street food tent that served soju and tekbaki and other dishes that cost less than his morning coffee. She'd insisted after the clinic closed, saying if he wanted to understand her world, he needed to eat where she ate. They sat on plastic stools that were slightly sticky, surrounded by construction workers and taxi drivers and students. No one recognized Jean Wu here. No one feared him. He was just another customer in a suit that was too nice for the venue. "This is your regular spot?" he asked, watching Rosie order in broken Korean supplemented with enthusiastic hand gestures. 3 times a week at least. Mrs. Song makes the best kimchi jjigae in Seoul, and she only charges me half price because I treated her daughter's pneumonia. Rosie grinned at him. Not as fancy as Moonlight Garden. No, but somehow better. The food arrived steaming hot, and they ate with their fingers, dipping rice cakes in sauce, sharing banchan from communal plates. Jean Wu couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten like this. Messy, casual, with someone who wasn't trying to impress him or fear him. "Tell me about your father," Rosie said, pouring them both soju. Not the disappointment at the end. The man before that. Jean Wu accepted the shot glass, turning it thoughtfully. He was complicated, brilliant, but ruthless. He built everything from nothing, came from a poor fishing village, worked his way up through sheer will. He taught me that the world doesn't give you anything. You take it, or someone else will. Sounds lonely. Is. Jean Wu downed the soju, felt it burn. After my mother got sick, after Jasmine betrayed me, I became him. The ruthless version. The one who trusts no one and gives nothing freely. I thought that was strength. What do you think now? I think strength and hardness aren't the same thing. I think my father died bitter and alone because he never learned the difference. Jean Wu met her eyes. I don't want to die like that. Rosie reached across the small table, her hand covering his. Then don't. You get to choose who you become, Jean Wu. Every single day, you get to choose. What if I don't know how? Then you learn. You practice. You fail and try again. She smiled. Kind of like medicine. Actually, every patient teaches you something. Every mistake makes you better. The only real failure is refusing to try. They talked for hours, long after the food was gone, working their way through a bottle of soju. Jean Wu told her about his mother's garden, how she could make anything grow, even in the concrete jungle of Seoul. Rosie told him about her childhood in Atlanta, her mother's slow death from cancer, the medical bills that bankrupted them despite insurance. That's why you became a doctor, Jean Wu realized. That's why I became this kind of doctor. I could have gone into plastic surgery, made a fortune in Beverly Hills. But I kept thinking about my mom, about how the system failed her, how it fails everyone who isn't rich enough to matter. Rosie's eyes were distant, sad. So I went to Doctors Without Borders after residency. Syria, Yemen, South Sudan. Places where being a doctor meant the difference between life and death. That's where you got this. Jean Wu touched the scar on her wrist, the one he'd noticed at dinner. Shrapnel. Airstrike hit near our field hospital in Aleppo. I was lucky. 3 of my colleagues died that day. Her voice went quiet. That's when I realized I couldn't do war zones anymore. I was burned out, traumatized, having nightmares. So I came to Seoul, somewhere that wasn't actively being bombed, but where I could still help people who needed it. You're incredible, Jean Wu said softly. You know that, right? What you do, what you survived, it's remarkable. So are you. He laughed bitterly. I run nightclubs and protection rackets. I'm not exactly saving lives. You saved Min Jun today. You could have ignored me, ignored him, protected your wallet and your prejudice. But you didn't. You chose compassion over comfort. That's remarkable. Jean Wu wanted to argue, wanted to deflect, but the sincerity in her eyes stopped him. When had anyone last looked at him like that? Like he was more than his reputation, more than his father's legacy, more than a monster he'd become? They left the Pojangmaka after midnight, walking through Seoul's quiet streets. Jean Wu's driver followed at a discreet distance, but for once, he didn't care about appearances or safety. He just wanted to walk with Rosie, listening to her talk about her patients, her dreams, her fears. Day 2 tomorrow, she said as they reached her building. You sure you want to keep coming? It's going to be more of the same. Long hours, difficult cases, not enough resources. I'm sure. Jean Wu surprised himself with how much he meant it. Besides, I made a deal. 1 week. 1 week, Rosie agreed. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and warm. Good night, Jean Wu. Thank you for today. For everything. She was inside before he could respond, leaving him standing on the dark street with his fingers pressed to his cheek where her lips had been. His phone buzzed again. His cousin, more insistent now. Jean Wu finally looked at the message. We need to talk about your recent activities. You're making yourself vulnerable. He deleted it without responding. The rest of the week passed in a blur of revelation. Jean Wu arrived at the clinic each morning with coffee, stayed until evening, learning the rhythms of Rosie's world. He met her patients, heard their stories, watched her work miracles with almost nothing. On day 3, he made another anonymous donation. New equipment, upgraded facilities. Rosie pretended not to know where it came from, but her smile told him everything. On day 4, a crisis. An elderly patient needed emergency surgery, but no hospital would take them without payment. Jean Wu made one phone call, and suddenly doors opened. The surgery happened. The patient survived. Why do you help if you hate? Rosie started to ask as they left the hospital. I don't hate you, Jean Wu interrupted. The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. I tried to. God knows I tried. But I don't. She took his hand, threaded her fingers through his. They walked like that back to the clinic, not talking, just existing together in comfortable silence. On day 5, Rosie asked about his ex. They were eating ramen in her tiny apartment. She'd insisted on cooking for him, though cooking meant boiling water and adding flavor packets. Tell me about her, Rosie said. About Jasmine. Jean Wu stared into his bowl, watching steam rise. She was beautiful, charming, smart enough to play me perfectly. We met at one of my clubs. She was a graduate student studying international business. Or that's what she told me. Really, she was scouting for my rivals, learning our operations. How long were you together? 2 years. I thought she loved me. I thought his voice caught. I thought she saw past the reputation to who I really was. Turns out she just saw an opportunity. What happened when you found out? I confronted her. She laughed. Said I was a fool to think someone like her could love someone like me. Said she'd gotten everything she needed. Money, information, connections. She thanked me for being so easy to manipulate. Jean Wu's hands clenched around his chopsticks. Then she disappeared, probably living in luxury somewhere on my money, with my secrets sold to the highest bidder. Rosie was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'm not her. I know. Do you? Really? She turned to face him fully. Because every time you look at me, I can see you comparing. Every time you start to trust me, you pull back. I'm not your ex, Jinwoo. I'm not whatever nightmare she left you with. I'm just Rosie. And maybe that's not enough for you, and that's okay. But don't punish me for her crimes. Jinwoo set down his bowl, his heart pounding. You're right. I have been comparing you to her. But not anymore. Because you know what I realized today? Watching you with Mrs. Choi, spending an hour just talking to her about her grandchildren, even though you had 10 other patients waiting? Jasmine would never have done that. She didn't have the capacity for that kind of compassion. She was all surface, no substance. But you, he reached out, cupped Rosie's face gently. You're all substance, all heart, all the things I thought didn't exist anymore. Jinwoo, let me finish. Please. His thumb brushed across her cheek. I've spent 3 years building walls, convincing myself that being alone was safer than being vulnerable. And then you spilled coffee on me, and those walls started cracking. Every day this week, you've shown me what it means to actually care about something beyond yourself. You've made me want to be better. Not for my mother, not for my reputation, but for you. Because you deserve someone who's worthy of your kindness. Rosie's eyes filled with tears. You are worthy. You always were. You just forgot. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she might break. She tasted like ramen and hope, and when she kissed him back, Jinwoo felt something inside him finally, completely shatter. Not his heart, his armor. They pulled apart slowly, foreheads touching, breathing hard. Day 6 tomorrow, Rosie whispered. One more day. What happens after day 7? I don't know. What do you want to happen? Jinwoo pulled back to look at her properly. I want more than 7 days. I want to keep coming to the clinic. I want to help you save lives. I want to. He stopped, terrified of the words forming on his tongue. Say it, Rosie urged. I want to see where this goes. Us. Whatever this is. She smiled, radiant and real. I want that too. Day 6 brought unexpected complications. Jinwoo's cousin showed up at the clinic just before closing, flanked by 2 of his thugs. Jinwoo had been in the back room, reviewing medication inventory with Rosie, when he heard the commotion in the waiting room. He emerged to find his cousin, Dae-young, sneering at the elderly patient still waiting to be seen. So this is where you've been hiding, Dae-young said, his voice dripping contempt. Playing doctor with your new pet? Jinwoo felt rage flood through him, cold and controlled. Leave. Now. Or what? You'll have your men rough me up? Oh wait, your men are starting to wonder if you've gone soft. Spending every day in this dump instead of running your empire. Some are saying maybe it's time for new leadership. This area is under my protection. That includes this clinic and everyone in it. Dae-young laughed. Protection? From what? Poverty? Disease? You can't punch those things, cousin. You can't intimidate them. You're wasting your time here, and everyone knows it. Rosie stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. You need to leave. You're scaring my patients. Dae-young's eyes raked over her with obvious disdain. Ah, the American. I heard about you. The black doctor who's got my cousin wrapped around her finger. Tell me, how much is he paying you? Because I'll double it to disappear. Jinwoo moved before he could think, grabbing Dae-young by the collar and slamming him against the wall. The thugs reached for their weapons, but Jinwoo's own men, who'd been waiting outside, appeared in the doorway, hands on their guns. You will apologize to Dr. Davis, Jinwoo said quietly, each word sharp as a blade. Then you will leave and never come near this clinic again. You're protecting her? A woman you barely know? You really have gone soft. Dae-young smiled, vicious and knowing. Mother's dying, isn't she? That's why she's so desperate to reform you, making you jump through hoops for your inheritance. But what happens when she's gone, cousin? What happens when there's no one left to guilt you into playing nice? Jinwoo's fist connected with Dae-young's jaw before he could stop himself. The crack echoed through the clinic. Dae-young stumbled, blood trickling from his split lip. Get out, Jinwoo said. Now, before I do something we'll both regret. Dae-young straightened, wiping blood from his mouth. This isn't over. You've made yourself weak, and weakness gets destroyed. In our world, you know that. He left, his thugs following. The patients who'd witnessed everything sat frozen, terrified. Jinwoo turned to find Rosie staring at him, her expression unreadable. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have. You defended me. Her voice was soft. And my patience. You could have let him say whatever he wanted, could have avoided making an enemy. But you didn't. He disrespected you. I won't tolerate that. Your knuckles are bleeding. Rosie took his hand, examining the split skin. Come on, let me clean this up. In her exam room, as she carefully disinfected and bandaged his hand, neither of them spoke. Finally, Jean Wu broke the silence. He's right, you know. I am making myself vulnerable. In my world, that's dangerous. Is it worth it? Rosie asked, taping the bandage. The risk. Jean Wu looked at her, really looked at her. At the concern in her eyes, the gentleness of her touch, the way she'd stood up to De-young without flinching. Yes, he said simply. You're worth it. That night, Jean Wu returned to his penthouse to find his mother waiting. She looked frilier than he remembered, her illness finally showing despite her careful makeup and elegant hanbok. Mother, what are you doing here? Checking on my son. She gestured to the couch. Sit. Tell me about Dr. Davis. Jean Wu sat, suddenly feeling like a teenager again. She's remarkable. You love her. I barely know her. You know enough. His mother's smile was knowing. I've been watching you this week, Jean Wu. You're different. Softer. More like the boy you used to be. Is that why you did this? The blind date, the ultimatum? I did it because I'm dying, and I needed to know my son would be all right when I'm gone. Not financially. You'll always have money. But emotionally, spiritually, I needed to know you'd have someone who could reach past your walls. Jean Wu felt his throat tighten. How long do you have? 4 months, maybe 5. The treatments aren't working. She took his hand. Don't look like that. I've lived a good life. I've loved and been loved. I built an empire and raised a son I'm proud of. My only regret is what you became after Jasmine. So cold. So alone. I was protecting myself. You were dying slowly. There's a difference between protection and prison, my son. She squeezed his hand. Dr. Davis is good for you. She challenges you, makes you think beyond yourself. But De-young is right about one thing. She makes you vulnerable, and your enemies will use that. I can handle De-young. Can you handle what he represents? The part of your world that sees compassion as weakness, that will target anyone you care about. His mother's eyes were serious. If you pursue this with Dr. Davis, you need to be prepared to protect her. Really protect her. Because men like your cousin won't hesitate to use her against you. Jean Wu thought about that as he lay in bed that night, unable to sleep. His mother was right. Caring about Rosie painted a target on her back. The smart thing would be to walk away after day 7, protect her by keeping distance between them. But when morning came, Jean Wu found himself driving to the clinic anyway. Because for the first time in 3 years, the smart thing mattered less than the right thing. Day 7, the final day. Rosie greeted him with coffee and a smile that made his chest ache. Last day of your sentence. How do you feel? Like I don't want it to end. They fell into the familiar rhythm. Patience, paperwork, small moments of laughter between crises. Around noon, Min Jun came in for his first chemotherapy session with Dr. Kim. The boy was scared, clutching his grandmother's hand. But when he saw Jean Wu and Rosie together, he brightened. Mr. Park, are you Dr. Rosie's boyfriend yet? Jean Wu looked at Rosie, saw her blush, and made a decision. Would that be okay with you? Min Yun nodded enthusiastically. Grandma says everyone needs someone to hold their hand when they're scared. Your grandma is very wise. Jean Wu knelt down to Min Jun's level. You're going to be brave today, right? The medicine might make you feel sick, but it's making you better. Will you stay with me? Jean Wu looked at Rosie, who nodded permission. I'll stay. He sat with Min Jun through the entire session, holding the boy's small hand, telling him stories about growing up in Seoul. When Min Jun finally fell asleep, exhausted from the treatment, his grandmother approached Jean Wu with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered in halting Korean. Thank you for giving us hope. Jean Wu had to step outside, the weight of her gratitude almost too much to bear. Rosie found him on the building steps, staring at the late afternoon sun. You okay? She asked, sitting beside him. I've spent 3 years convincing myself that nothing I did mattered. That my empire was just business, that my choices didn't affect anyone but myself. He turned to look at her. You've shown me that's a lie. Everything matters. Every choice echoes. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, like, comment, share, and subscribe to OU channel.